3, 2, 1.
Alright, guys, you guys are now tuned in to the only Bearded Dragon podcast that matters on a Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Usually it's on Mondays. This week was an interesting week for everybody, so we're going to be doing the podcast tonight, Wednesday. We have Travis coming in. Got Josh tonight for half the episode. So for those of you guys that don't know, we did do this episode already. My phone overheated literally right at the end. It was too hot of a episode to upload to YouTube. It overheated. Ended up losing the episode, so we're redoing it tonight. Beardies for Beginners 2.0. So we're going to do it even better than we did the first one. So if you missed out on the first one, don't worry about it. Tonight's episode is going to be just as good, if not better. And if you got to see the other one and you're still tuning in tonight, it's going to be a great one because we'll touch on a few topics that we missed. So, to give you guys a little bit of a run. Well, let me introduce. We got Travis from Cool Dragons. Thank you for coming in tonight. He's been very busy, had some things going on, so thank you for being able to share your time with us tonight.
Yeah, no problem, man.
And, of course, Josh, thank you, as always.
Deserved.
So tonight we're going to be talking about temps, enclosures, diet, supplements, tools, enrichment, care, and lighting. If you guys, it might not be in that same exact order, but those are the topics that we are going to be touching on tonight. Everything that you should know and need to know about keeping your bearded dragon, possibly before you get it, or if you have just gotten one and you're really looking for like some good information, tonight's the night that you're going to get all that information that you need to know. So first I got a question for Travis and Josh. I'll let you guys answer one at a time, but what do you guys think the most important thing to know before getting a bearded dragon as a pet is? And remember, we're just talking pets tonight, everybody. No breeders, no breeding, no none of that. It's just going to be simple pet bearded dragons.
You can go ahead, Travis.
All right. In my opinion, the first thing you should know is how to take care of it. Do your research, get your enclosure set up, know where all the temps need to be, and know where you're going to get the food for that dragon, and know what it's going to roughly cost you on a weekly basis when it comes to that food. Because, I mean, let's face it, these things are like bottomless pits. They just consume insects like they're going out of style.
Yeah. So pretty much what he said, education, educate yourself. So tune into the Bearded Dragon podcast every Monday. Get yourself educated up before you go getting a bearded dragon. Make sure you know everything. At least watch this video 5 times before. If you haven't gotten a bearded dragon yet, watch tonight's episode. It's going to educate you on everything you do need to know. So he said education is the most important thing. Tonight we're going to be sharing all that important information for you. So stay tuned, guys. Josh, what is your most important thing they should know before getting one as a pet?
I still think that it's making sure that the parents of the babies were from a genetically correct pairing and not something that, let's say, for example, trans on trans. You don't want to start off the game on a bad note, and you can do everything right, have the right temperatures, right food, right everything, and that baby could still struggle or even pass away just because of the breeding that the breeder did or the store did, or you know what I mean. So I still think that making sure that the parents were compatible.
For sure, don't cheap out on your bearded dragon just because. And I'm not saying go to somebody that's going to overcharge you either, but
yeah.
If someone's selling you a bearded dragon for like $60 because they're your friend, you're probably going to run into some issues with that. But
yeah,
if you know that your friend's a reputable breeder, the parents, and they're just hooking you up, that's understandable. But if you're just Craigslist buying dragons, you're probably going to start off your whole experience really bad. So I do recommend also, like you said, a reputable breeder. And we talked about reputable breeders in the last podcast, and that's somebody that's just spreading positive information no matter what. If they don't have something, they'll point you in the right direction to somebody that does. They're not going to talk shit about everybody else in the industry. You're not going to see a lot of hate from the industry on them or people talking crap about what they're doing. So definitely most people know who the good people are out there that are doing it correctly, sharing everything that they do. If they're not sharing what the parents were, how they take care of their offspring, anything like that, it's probably not a reputable breeder. Most breeders will share everything with you. They're not going to hide. They have nothing to hide from you. So keep an eye out for that. Always make sure you're buying from, someone good. Start off your experience right.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we're going to start off with some cages because I think that's probably, besides food, cages is the most expensive part that people don't think about. And they always buy the reptile first and then the cage. And they cheap out on the cage because they spend so much on the reptile, they don't got enough for the cage.
Yeah.
So always buy the cage first. That's going to be my first tip of the night. Always buy the cage first. Make sure that you have everything ready before the dragon comes. So, you guys, I got another question for you. We can touch on, what cage size do you recommend for a bearded dragon that is 9 months old or younger?
Travis or me first?
We'll just go the same. Trav, you can start it off.
All right, I would say minimal 20 gallon for the youngers. I mean, if it's a good dragon by 9 months, and you've fed it, you've given it all its supplements, and you've given it everything that it needs, by 9 months, that dragon's pretty big already.
Yeah.
And could easily be into a 40-gallon tank.
Yeah.
So I'd say probably 20 gallon up to 4 or 5 months. And then I would start switching over to a 60-gallon. And then after a year, me personally, is a 4x2x2.
All right. What about you, Josh? What do you think?
Yeah, he hit it on the head. A 36, I think for babies, a 36, like a 40-gallon breeder. What I recommend is cutting it in half, and then as they grow, you can kind of open the cage up until it's open normally. And then if they're just a really big dragon, then a 4x2x2 would be the best.
And what Josh means by cutting it in half, so if you had say this 125-gallon was a 40-gallon breeder, I would put a divider right here that goes across, cuts it in half. And then slowly, as the dragon gets older, I'd give him more space. Obviously, that's a 125-gallon tank. I'm not going to put any bearded dragons in there. Maybe like multiple bearded dragon females to get some enrichment, which is actually what it's going to be for until we get baby tegus. What is up, Dragon Haas? So, you kind of already said it, Trav. You think by adulthood you should have them in a 4x2x2. Josh, you have 3x18x2s?
Yeah, I have a 36x24x18.
Okay, and I got 3x18x18. So any of those, I think I got the minimal size that you should have an adult in, definitely. Don't go any smaller than a 36x18x18, but that's, in my situation, the perfect size that I could offer. So Travis said he likes the 4x2x2s.
Yep.
He puts branches and nice stuff in there. If you guys watch it, his dragons are always letting their guts hang off the branches and stuff, being lazy, looking ridiculous. So they definitely love it. If you can get the taller cages and put nice stuff in there for them to hang out on, they will do that. In the wild, I'm sure they hid in bushes and stuff like that all the time. Dead bushes, perfect branches. Yeah, see, that's the same thing. That's like a dead bush. So that's probably something that they would hang out on in the wild.
Yeah.
Perfect enrichment, something cool that gives off smells, textures, high.
You can look up
to climb on.
You can look up videos on YouTube, and some people have videos on YouTube with just them in their natural environment.
Yeah.
Every time they spot them, they are up on a dead tree branch, a fence pole or something. They like being up, you know.
Yeah.
That's why I choose the 2 foot tall, because I like to have my branches as tall as I can. And then obviously, you know, we really like bioactive, so I got to have room for the plants and stuff also.
Hey Travis, off topic. Are you just running regular UVB bulbs, or do you have plant bulbs in your tank?
No, I also have the Arcadia Jungle Dawn LEDs in there for plants.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, a UVB bulb doesn't have enough red spectrum in it.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes
you
sense.
really need the
Plant life.
UVA.
Yeah, because in my Savannah enclosure, I had plants and they all died. I'm like, what the hell? I have UVB light, and they're
Yeah,
they're
you
all
definitely need UVB or UVAs to grow any types of plants. And if you just have your heat bulb in there, that's not going to be adequate because it's going to burn it up before you even get enough UVA to the plant.
Yeah, I just have a regular bulb and then a UVB bulb, the T5s.
Yeah, I'm the worst. I kill every plant that has. If I don't kill it, my Savannah monitor does. My Tegu does. The monitors tear it up. Like it's no good. I can't keep plants for shit. The only bioactive enclosures I have are my 2 frogs, and they got a nice supply of isopods in there, and they don't really mess with it. They don't really move at all. They kind of stay in one corner or in their water bowl, one or the other, so they don't do much.
Yeah, the plants don't survive long when you got the bearded dragons. They climb all over them. They destroy them. That elephant bush that I have is almost completely just obliterated. There's no leaves left on it. On top of the fact that they do eat them too.
See, I had this really nice, my fucking chameleon decided to start eating like the fake leaves the other day. I noticed like some of my fake leaves are gone. I was like, oh, great. That better come out. But my Savannah monitor, I had this nice, like, I went to Home Depot and bought like this $40 little small palm tree. And I was like, yeah, this is going to be awesome in his cage. I put it in there. Man, he tore that thing. It was like 3 days of him just shredding that thing. He did not like it at all. As soon as I put it in there, he just wanted to tear it up. I was like,
Hey, have you ever gave him a stuffed animal?
What?
Have you ever gave him a stuffed animal? They go crazy. Like,
oh, no.
And then they drag them all around their cage. Pretty
Lord. I'm going to have to try that when we get off the podcast.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So now you guys know your enclosure sizes. You know what you should do before buying your bearded dragon. Make sure you're getting it from a reputable breeder. You're starting off with a healthy dragon. You got the proper cage enclosure sizes and everything ready to go before the dragon comes. And now we're going to talk about UVB. So UVB is more important than your basking lights. Your basking lights don't necessarily need to be on all day long. A lot of people do have their basking lights on. I've literally gotten messages where people say they keep them on 24/7. So, one, bearded dragons like to sleep. They need nighttime too. Like, we all get cranky when we don't sleep.
Yeah.
I'm probably the worst. If you don't give me sleep, I will just fall asleep on you. Like, it happens. I close my eyes and I just take a power nap for 45 minutes until you wake me up. So sleep, everybody needs it. Lights got to go off eventually. But if you're in a hot place like California where I'm at, I only have to run my basking bulbs 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours before my lights turn off. And that's adequate basking time for all the dragons. And then I just have my UVB bulbs running. But I also have stacks. So I have heat. As the heat rises through the cages from the UVB bulbs, the ambient temperature stays, relatively pretty warm. I'd say at least 86, like 82 to 86. So the dragons stay warm and they're getting proper UVB, but they don't need to bask all day. Like if you guys went out in the wild, dragons would not be basking all day long. They bask in the morning when the sun first comes out, and then usually some warmth to stay warm all throughout the night. But the reason UVB is so important, I'm going to let you guys talk about it, but the question to you guys is going to be, why is UVB so important? Travis, we'll let you take it off.
Well, the You have to have it for the D3 cycle, the vitamin D3 cycle. Without the vitamin D3 cycle,
It doesn't.
your animal cannot absorb calcium. Calcium runs everything inside that animal's body. And if it cannot absorb any calcium, it has to take it from wherever it can, which then it starts taking it from its bones. And then you'll end up with metabolic bone disease. So no matter how much calcium you pound into that reptile, like it used, like back in the day when metabolic bone disease was really bad, everyone always just said, just give them more calcium. You need to give them more calcium. But it didn't change anything because they didn't realize that you needed that vitamin.
Yep.
So that's why it is so important. It's absolutely necessary. Without it, your dragon will grow up and have brittle bones, disformed limbs, curved spines, tails, and that's even if it survives long enough to get to all of that. Because calcium is also used for all their organs too, which will start getting damaged and start to fail at the same time.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, yeah, Travis hit it right on the head. I mean, there's UVB is probably the most important, but yet simplest thing. I'm trying to think of how it's kind of like our bodies, like with insulin and how your body digests the sugars. Like you need insulin for your body to digest into the cells, all that stuff. So it's very similar, and it's just when people ask me what's the most important thing to buy before, I always say UVB. It's probably the most important and the most expensive because that's something that you always have to buy. And bulbs, like you guys know, are 30, 40, 50, 60 bucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we get into tools, the tool to check your UVB is probably the most expensive one too. So you got to change those lights out more often because really your basking light, you can use combo bulbs and everything, but like I just said, you don't want to run your basking light all day if you don't have to. If you're in a warm place where you can keep the ambient temperature up without basking bulbs. So if you're not running the combo bulb, or if you are running a combo bulb, you can't do that because your UVB and your UVA are both coming from the same bulb. So that's also
the mercury vapor.
Yeah.
Mercury vapor bulb.
So you definitely want to use my next topic, a T5 or a T8 instead of just combo bulbs, or instead of I forget what they're called, but they're small, like 10.0s, Reptisun bulbs. And
The compact?
Yeah, the compact ones. So the smaller
Yeah.
ones, they aren't a long fixture. They don't give a very large radius of UVB exposure. So if your dragon's not in that,
like they have to be like
4 inches,
like that close. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, they literally got to be laying on the freaking bulb to get it. T5s or T8s, and then it also matters about the quality bulb or brand that you're buying. But T5s and T8s put off with the reflectors, put off much more exposure for your bearded dragon. Travis can talk a little bit more about that. That's the light guy. If you guys ever have problems with your lights, Travis is the guy you want to talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with the bulbs too, is the reflector on your fixture makes a huge difference. If you have a cheap reflector, you're not going to be reflecting down all the light that you need, because UVB is going to just tear stuff up. That's what it does. Ultraviolet rays tear things up, makes plastic brittle. It just erodes everything. So what some of these cheaper companies have done to make their reflectors last longer is they put them in a UVB or a UV coating on top of them. So then it kind of takes away what the reflector is doing. It can't reflect UV because the coating is absorbing it.
Yeah.
So if you have one of those tubes and you have it in a cheap fixture with a cheap reflector, more than likely you could even see an increase in UVB by removing the reflector than actually having it on there.
Yeah.
And it's usually where you find those is whenever you use lights that are coming from like plant grows, because they don't have such a highly concentrated amount of UV coming out of there. So they can coat it and it works just fine. It doesn't destroy them. I had some when we first started and they didn't give me any increase in UV output because they weren't reflecting anything, and they turned yellow and started crumbling within 3 months.
Yep.
And they were high dollar. I mean, they worked really good for growing plants. They just can't handle the UV bulbs.
Yeah, so a lot of people, you'll notice that when you buy a fixture for UVB bulbs, they look just like the ones you can get at a hydroponic store that's a T5 or a T8. But like Travis said, those bulbs that they use are LED bulbs, so they don't need, they don't get hit by UVB. So they coat all their stuff in protective coatings so that it lasts longer. Well, they don't need it to reflect UVB. They need it to reflect UVAs or LED lighting around, because that's what's going to make the plant grow. They're not trying to make dragons grow. And UVB is going to help with the entire process of breaking down vitamins in your bearded dragon. So it's the most important thing. You're going to go downhill really quickly if you don't have your UVB right. And there's different percentage bulbs that you can get. If you got like a bigger enclosure that's higher, you're going to need more percentage to get that UVB down into the cage. And if you got one like me, you don't have to use such a high percentage of UVB, but you need to know that you're using the right percentage. Travis is also the guy to talk to about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If you have, like, we have 2 foot tall enclosures, so we use the 14% dragon bulb. But if you have, like, I would say the minimal height enclosure I'd use a 14% is 18-inch, but I would honestly recommend a 12 for that.
That's what I
Because
use, 12%.
Yeah, if you use a 14 in an 18-inch, you're not going to want anything that they can, like, really climb on to get closer to the bulb. You know, you got to always remember that light is energy, and the more light that's put out, the more energy that's put out. And if that animal can get real close, you can give scale burns, you can burn their eyes, you can do a lot of damage to them by putting too much energy and light inside there.
Yeah.
And to touch base there, I saw Round Table Dragons, you asked about a mercury vapor bulb along with the T5. You can use mercury vapor with other UVs, because mercury vapor just should not be the sole area for UVB, because they do put off a lot of heat, and if your dragon starts to overheat underneath there, it's going to leave. And if it doesn't have another source of UVB to get to, then it's going to be lacking. And that's the huge problem with mercury vapor bulbs. As Jeremiah had said, is they put off a lot of heat, a lot of UVB. They don't have any kind of control. You can't dim them down. If they're too hot, they're too hot. And if the dragon can't sit underneath there, they get no UVB. And the radius of where that UVB is directed underneath is very small of a circle. It's just straight down. So if you have one in there, no matter the size of the watt, if you go to the halfway point of that enclosure, I can almost guarantee there is 0 UVB being shown. I personally would never recommend mercury vapor as a sole heat source or UVB source. They're just not dependable enough, and they do not put out the amount of UVB that everyone thinks they do. I would say a mercury vapor bulb is equivalent to a T8, and T8s they're very weak. They really don't have much place in a bearded dragon setup, in my opinion, unless you're really short or you have something that can climb really close to that bulb, because a T8 for a bearded dragon, they have to get within 8 to 6 inches of that bulb to get the required amount, and that's without any screens or anything. That's really close.
Super close.
And for those of you that don't know, T5 fixtures will take T5 and T8 bulbs. T8 fixtures will only take T8 bulbs. Just a little hack. So if you end up buying T5s and you're worried about the UVB exposure, you could always use a T8. But if you buy T8 fixtures, you cannot use a T5 on them. Also, you want to make sure that you have a place for your bearded dragon to escape UVB. You don't want to be exposing it all the time.
Yeah.
So when you take that basking bulb away like I do after 2 hours and I just have the T5 fixture in there, there's plenty of spaces for the bearded dragon to now escape to away from the UVB, so I'm not just overexposing it all day long, because they do need to escape from it too.
Yes, that's really important. You got to have light on one side, shade on the other, is how we usually have ours set up. That way, if they want to escape from anything, take a nap, you know, whatever they want to do, they have their own little place that they can go.
Yep.
And it's good just to have them a shaded spot just for them to hide in case they just don't want to interact with anything or anyone and they want to go chill on their own. That's good for their own head, you know?
Yeah, if they're feeling
Everybody
grumpy
likes
or
a dark
something.
room sometimes.
For sure.
All right, guys, so let's talk enclosure temps. Josh, we'll let you start this one off. What are good enclosure temps for a baby and then also an adult? Start off with the baby, though.
For babies, my personal opinion, the simpler the more. So especially with like substrate, reptile carpet, tiles, paper towels. Some enclosures you could do bare, but again, I prefer carpets, just because you can literally slide them out, hose them off, dry them, put them back in, or while you're washing one, you have like the replacement and you kind of slide it back in. That is good. They can grip on it. It's easy to clean. Doesn't really hold that much smell. You can wash it. They're cheap, and you can change the colors up in your enclosures to kind of give a different feel. So that's probably my biggest tip. And then I'm a big fan of driftwood. Driftwood is a little expensive depending on where you live, but you literally take it outside, hose it off, keep it in the sun for a little bit, let it dry, put it back in, and it looks good in the enclosures. They like it, and you can always buy more of it if it goes bad. What about you, Travis?
Yeah, no, that sounds all about right there. I don't know what else I could add on that. Those are some pretty good tips for the enclosure.
Or maybe the
Adds a good amount of enrichment and easy to clean.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only thing I could tell you guys is well, if you only have one, we're talking about babies tonight. So if you have one bearded dragon, you can kind of go above and beyond. You know,
Yeah.
the pillows are cool, the reptile hammocks are cool. Everything is nice. You just got to keep it sterile. So make sure you're keeping everything clean. Whatever you do have in there, you know, at least deep clean, you know, once a week, I would say, and then just spot clean poops throughout the week as you see them, and then every weekend make sure that you're doing, you know, a nice deep clean, because bacteria grows really quickly, and if you got a lot of stuff in there, there's a lot of stuff for bacteria to grow on, and you could get a lot of problems with bacteria. It's not good for your bearded dragons. I hate to see someone get a upper respiratory infection just because they want to keep, you know, a stuffed animal in their enclosure.
Yep.
Yeah, anything with porous, kind of like a stuffed animal fabric or whatever, is going to harbor bacteria if you don't clean it on a regular basis.
For sure. All right, guys, what temperatures do you keep your enclosures at?
So for like our babies, I like to stay in the basking spot is going to be right around 115, 125. And then the rest of it is just my house temperature. Usually, you know, it's around 80 or so.
That's actually the highest temp I've ever heard, Travis.
What?
That's the highest temperature I've ever heard.
For what? The basking spot?
Yeah, I mean, not that it's a bad thing. I've just never heard like, so mine's like 115. I could probably get it to 125 if I up the bulb a little bit, because I'm only using 25 watts, but I've never heard 125. And believe me, your babies look very healthy, so it's obviously working. Maybe I should up my temps a little bit.
No, I mean 115 works fine too. I mean, I'm just saying that's my range that I go for. If I set up the enclosure and for whatever reason the rock that's underneath there's holding more heat and it goes up to 120, you know, I don't change the rock out because I know they're still going to be fine.
Yeah. That's how I used to run my tubs, around 115 to 119 ish. But with these stacks, if I have a basking spot at 125, the hot spot, I mean the cold spot's gonna be like 110. So with the PVC, so with these, I keep my basking spots like at 105, 106, and my cool side is high 80s. So I try to vent it as much as possible, but it's impossible with the ones that I have. With the 4-footers, I could probably get away with it, but keep 120.
Lost him.
Oh. With the 4-footers, what'd you say?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we lost you for a second.
There you go.
What was the last thing you guys heard? I'll repeat it.
The 4-footers.
Oh, I said, so with the 4-footer, I could probably get away with those temperatures because you have more of a span to kind of like for like the heat graduate to get cooler. But with the 3-footers, it's not enough space to go from 125 to 80s. It's impossible.
Yeah, literally with the 3-footers, the only thing I've been able to do to combat that hot spot or the cool spot getting too hot with a basking spot is cut the basking bulbs out after 2 hours. Like give them 2 hours in the morning, and then I have to cut them off because I've come in and I've had my basking spot at like 125 and my cool spot at 90, and I'm just like the dragon didn't seem at all uncomfortable, but in my own head I'm like, dude, that's fucking hot. Like it has nowhere to go to cool down. I like to keep my cool spots 85 or below on the cool side. 80 to 85. Yeah, for Someone was asking the wattage of the bulbs. The wattage of the bulbs that I use on my entire stack are 20 or 50s. Actually, no, I changed it. It's 30-watt bulbs all on the bottom 4, and then the 3 above them are all 25s.
Where'd you get the 30 and 25? Because I couldn't find it.
So you got to check Amazon like daily, because I'll go on there and it'll be like 8 in stock, and then they get out, and you just got to the same ones I've been buying off Amazon, those littler ones. I just got to keep check every day.
I was thinking about doing 15s because the heat is on top. Those are the hottest cages that I can't really. I'm having troubles like keeping them. I have to like open them and put like a screen. You know what I mean?
No.
So
look at this thing. I'll show you right now. All right, so this is what I use to cool my cages down. So
the fuck is that? Like a fan?
Yeah, vent fan.
You hear that thing? Woo! I just started a jet over here. This motherfucker blows. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But then I got my carbon charcoal filter on top with the fan. So there's a lot of fans in here that help a lot, but the fans did nothing to help with that until I cut the basking bulbs out. I had to cut the basking bulbs out.
So
the bad problem with majority of enclosures, and it's kind of like touching on what just Roundtable Dragons just said, most enclosures do not have the proper ventilation.
Yeah.
They don't have, you got to have some kind of like a cross flow ventilation, so that the air can come in from the back and go out the front, or vice versa. Because if you think of like air is like water, if you have vents just on the back and that's it, it's not going to go in one hole, turn around, and go out the other hole. So your ventilation inside there is going to be horrible.
Most of the holes that are on the back with the vents, they don't even let air flow out really well. So
no.
Yeah, definitely.
So you got to have it.
Holes in the front or on the sides, on all 4 sides, like that's just beneficial.
I'm scared to. I mean, not scared, but I don't want to drill into the cages.
Oh yeah, don't do it, Josh, because I'm not gonna do it either. So do the plexiglass thing where you drill the holes in the plexiglass and use the slider like John was telling us.
Yeah,
make a cheese grater out of it.
Yeah,
I'm not going into my cages. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, and if your cages if you got a stack and your cages are touching each other, then the heat soak will transfer from one to the other, and it makes it harder.
Correct.
Yeah.
So like with my setup, we had to open them about 8 inches apart, every enclosure, each stack, to make sure one wasn't heat soaking the other.
Yeah, so what I did was I divided mine. So I put this 2x4 so it keeps the bottom stack from raising too much heat to the top stack.
Yeah.
So I put a 4-inch divider in between the stacks.
Well, and what I meant was on the sides of the enclosure, because did you see how you have your hot side on one tank?
Yeah,
And it's
definitely.
buttered
That's
up
why,
to keep the cool side.
Yeah.
So
that's
it
why
heats
I
up
had
your
to do
cool
the
side.
basking bulbs. That's why I had to kill the basking bulbs, because the basking bulb was touching the cool side of the other dragon.
Yeah.
So it was fucking heating that spot up. So as soon as I cut the basking bulb off after 2 hours, it wasn't heating the other guy's cool spot anymore.
And that's
Yeah.
why I separated mine. So that way everybody has, like, so they're all on the same side, but everybody has gaps in between their,
Yeah.
and,
Perfect.
which I didn't like that. I wanted them all to be together and symmetrical, but the heat was too much. It wasn't, I did that without really doing that. You know what I mean? I just kind of thought it would work, and it actually does work, but.
Yeah.
All right,
But
guys.
for me personally, I use the Arcadia 50-watt basking bulbs, which are like a halogen bulb.
Yep.
You can put a dimmer on there, and you can dim it down and fine tune it to whatever you want. So say if you had one of those in every one of your stacks, you can dim them down all the way to the top one to get your temperatures right.
Yeah, but how would you dim it? So I have. So
You
each
connect
stack
them
is
all
on a,
with an extension cord, Josh, and then put the extension cord onto a dimmer, and then you can dim the whole everything on the extension cord.
No. What I'm saying is I have each stack on a 6-foot power strip. There's 12 plugs on the power strip.
Yeah.
So I would have to put a dimmer on each one.
No. You put
Only
one
for the
plug.
basking.
So plug your dimmer into the power strip, and then plug a plug that has multiple outlets that you can plug all your bulbs into, and it'll dim all your heating bulbs at one time.
I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah,
that would just slightly work, but your bottom one, like you're gonna want your
bottom
enclosure can be
Yeah.
higher than the next one, so you want to have
So
like a dimmer on the next one.
Each one only has 3 plugs. So if you have a 4-stack, I take that back. You can only control the dimming on the top 3. You would have to do something. You would have to do a whole nother dimmer for the 4th bottom one. But if you,
it's an option if you're having a real hard time keeping your temperatures where you need to, and you're trying to buy all these different wattage bulbs.
Yeah.
If you just buy a dimmable halogen, then you can control it. Because I mean, not everybody has stacks of enclosures like we do.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
So if you just have one bearded dragon and you're having a hell of a time keeping your temps going, and getting them right, as long as you have the right basking bulb, you can put a little dimmer on there and you can fine tune it right to where you need.
Yes, that would be your best bet. If you're having trouble and you don't want to spend $1 million on multiple bulbs, just get a quality bulb and dim it down.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a dimmer at Home Depot is only $15. You'll spend more than that in light bulbs if you're trying to chase wattage.
For sure.
All right, guys, before we move on from temperatures, I'm just going to touch on a few things, and then we'll move into feeders. I see a bunch of people asking about that already, but I want to make sure I got a few topics written down that I don't want to miss. So ambient temperature is not the same as basking temperature. Basking temperature is the surface heat temperature of where your basking spot is. So the surface heat, not the ambient temperature. Ambient temperature is the heat of the air in the entire enclosure. You measure your ambient temperature with a thermometer, and you measure the temperature of your basking spot with a temperature gun, a infrared, laser, heat gun, whatever you want to call them. But you want the temperature of the surface area where your basking bulb is and the ambient temperature. You want both of those, because the ambient temperature is going to be the same on both sides of your enclosure. So if you put the thermometer on your cool side, it'll still tell you the ambient temperature in the entire enclosure. And then you use your infrared gun to get the surface heat of your basking platform. Solar meters are what you would use to measure your UVB rays to make sure that your UVB bulbs are still putting out proper UVB. They're a little expensive, but if you only have one bearded dragon, it is something you should definitely invest in. It'll make your life a lot easier. You can test your own bulbs. You won't be throwing bulbs away before they're good, and you can buy bulbs when you think you might keep bulbs around longer than they should. But with this solar meter, you'll be able to tell when they're going out.
Yep.
Yeah, that's about it. Oh, yeah. Also, screens and glass block UVB. So if you have a screen top enclosure, make sure you're checking your UVBs with your solar meter, because screen does block about 20 to 30% of UVB. Not as bad as glass, but glass will block a majority of your UVB. So if you have, for some reason, a glass top on your enclosure and you're trying to get light through there, or you think because you put your bearded dragon's cage next to the window and you get sunlight in there that he's getting UVBs, he's really not, because your glass is blocking it. His enclosure is probably blocking it even more. So he's really not getting any UVB, which he really needs. So we already talked about UVB being the most important thing. So make sure you're checking all those. You want quality equipment, quality bulbs. Make sure your lights are good, and you're not overexposing your reptile to UVB. Now we're gonna get on diet. Travis, I'm gonna ask you this question because you got the pro bugs, and you're probably the pro on variety. Because I can tell you right now that the variety you feed your reptiles is way wider than my variety. So why should you keep a variety of greens and insects in your bearded dragon's diet?
Well, I mean, because every insect has different levels inside of it. So if you say like one insect is high in calcium but low in something else, and you're always feeding it that one insect constantly. Yeah, it's getting its calcium, but it's also not getting whatever it's low in.
Yep.
So every time you add variety, you're having a whole bunch of different things that are being thrown at it, and the chances of you getting everything they need is a lot better. I mean, if you think about it in the wild, they encounter so many different insects on a daily basis that they can eat from, and every one of those insects has eaten from a different plant or something. So every one of those has a different nutritional value to it. So that's what, by giving them a variety, that's what you're trying to replicate, is all those different nutritional values.
And Josh, you being in Florida, I know it's really hard to get insects, but how do you keep a good variety in your diet for your bearded dragons?
One, a lot of money. No, but so we mainly feed black soldier fly larvae, superworms, crickets. I hate crickets, but they're plentiful down here. Discoid roaches, and then occasionally I'll throw in some hornworms. And then I've actually been talking to supplier about silkworms. I'm sure you guys know who I'm talking about. I just can never pronounce their name. Avtar.
Avengtar. I don't know.
Avengtar.
Avengtar is what I call them.
About hopefully getting some from him. But yeah, and then obviously all the different greens that we feed. But honestly, just depends. Like, so I kind of cycle through bugs a week. Like, so right now I have tons of larvae and I have tons of supers. I don't really have that many discoids. And then next week I should have crickets and I should have discoids. You know what I mean? So I kind of flip flop throughout the week, and that way the babies and the adults are constantly engaged because they're constantly seeing something different. You know, after a while, when you have an adult that just gets superworms, after a while they're like, yeah, I don't really care. Like, you know what I mean? But when they see a big roach get thrown in the room, like, wow, what is that? So I try to keep it as, you know, different for them as possible. But sometimes with the superworm pandemic a couple of months ago, you couldn't find supers. So my dragons haven't seen supers since I think like 3 weeks ago, in about a month or so. So now that I have supers, they're all excited to eat them, and that's what I try to strive for.
So guys, I want to touch on one little thing. So you got waxworms, black soldier fly larvae, hornworms, and silkworms, and those are all, in my opinion, like the fruits of the insect world, because they're very high in moisture content and calcium, but they're low in exoskeletons and stuff like that. So when your bearded dragons are eating them, if you're only feeding off these fruit insects, you're going to have lots of runny poop. There's nothing
Yeah.
to give them a solid poop. So when you have something with a little bit thicker exoskeleton, like your super worms or your mealworms, dubias, hissing roaches, stuff like that, and hissing roaches have the hardest exoskeleton, and your super worms probably have a thinner exoskeleton than mealworms, and are probably actually overall better. You probably really don't need mealworms. You could pretty much supplement everything a mealworm does by just feeding off supers. But the variety is always good. Like Travis was saying, you get different things from different insects. And if you're just feeding off all the good ones, all the fruits, you know, that they enjoy and love, instead of giving them, you know, the solid proteins that they need and the other stuff, then you're also going to run into fat, lazy, lethargic dragons. Like, and they're going to be freaking spoiled rotten, because those are the most expensive insects there are and the hardest ones to breed yourself, besides mealworms and supers. Like, I know a handful of people that try to do hornworms and silkworms themselves, and it is super hard. And I don't know anybody but maybe a handful of people that are doing black soldier fly larvae.
Yeah.
So also you can add pinkies, but I wanted to go over pinkies because when I say a pinky, it has to be hairless. So it can't be a hopper or a winged. It has to have no hair, because in the wild, most bearded dragons would not run into something with hair, and that can cause problems for them to get impacted if you're feeding off those very hairy rats or mice. You want to make sure they're almost hairless. Very, very, you know, day old, 2 days old, not very old, but it's high in protein. So if you got females that are producing eggs, it's a good way to supplement some protein into their diet in one meal. It's got lots of fats and calories in there too. So pinkies are something you don't want to do all the time, but it's good to supplement into the diet. But like I said, you want to make sure that they are pinkies and they don't have any hair on them. Also,
yeah, when they're pinkies, they believe their bones are just cartilage. Like their bones haven't turned solid yet. As soon as they start growing hair, then their bones start turning solid, and that's
soft.
where you can run into
you
their
don't
chance.
hear them crunch as much when they get eaten.
Yeah.
Also, if you have a hard time getting insects wherever you live due to whatever laws or reasons, gelatin diets are great. You could literally use about, they say on most of the containers that you could supplement 80% of this as your bearded dragon's diet. I don't recommend doing a gelatin diet 80% of your dragon's entire
maybe 25%,
diet, but
30.
Supplementing it with your greens every day, a little bit here and there, or every other day, throwing it on the greens, mixing it up. I do personally. I think it's a great way to get proteins and calcium and other vitamins that are vital to your bearded dragon. It's super easy to get them into the gelatin diet or the gelatin mixes, and they love it. Once you get them on it, they love it, and it's so easy to give them all their supplements and stuff. Because if you have a picky bearded dragon that doesn't like their greens, and you're dusting their greens all the time and they're just not eating them, then they're probably not getting their supplements. This way, it's super easy, and it's high in moisture content. So you're hydrating them while you're feeding them.
Hey guys,
I believe that.
Before you guys start, I have to head out. So appreciate you guys for tuning in. I will see you guys next Monday.
Hey, man.
Thank you guys.
Have a great night, Josh.
All right, man.
All right.
Yeah, I believe the Beardy Buffet is one that you can do as like a full meal replacement, diet replacement. And then the Grub Pie is like at the 80% that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And Arcadia's Insectigold, they recommend that only being like a 60%. That way you're still adding your bugs and whatnot for them.
Yeah, definitely. So, and also bugs are good for enrichment. If you got live bugs running around and they're chasing them, that's also great for enrichment. You're getting them to interact with their food. That's always a great thing, to get them to interact, to enjoy what they're doing. A lot of people say you keep them in a box, but honestly, they're more happy in their box and able to keep them happy and healthy in that box. If you go out to the wild and you caught most bearded dragons in the wild, they're going to be full of parasites. They're going to have tons of they're not going to be as healthy as one that you keep here. You can control the diet. Like, the pros and cons go both ways. Yes, in the wild,
Yeah.
they got tons of room, but here they got tons of food, so they don't have to fight for their food. I think Joe Rogan said it the best one time on his podcast. Like, I don't even think it was a podcast. It might have been like a comedy thing, but he was like, if you put a lion in the zoo or a monkey, something that's really smart that wants to run around, yes, it's really messed up. But when you take a giraffe that's only hunted all the time in the wild and you put them on a nice little ranch and you're like, here, we're going to feed you all day and you don't have to worry about getting attacked by anything, they're probably going to be like, hell yeah, like, I get protection and food. Like, why wouldn't I enjoy that? So
Yeah.
just, we're protecting them and feeding them. We're trying to give them the best, life we can with the most enrichment. So the people that are always saying, you guys just keep them in a box, stop thinking of the negatives, man. Think of the glass half full. We might have taken away some of their environment, but we're giving them so much more enrichment, so much more nutrition and food, stuff that they wouldn't. I bet you most bearded dragons in the wild probably die. 80% of them probably die by a year old. So if we have an 80% health rate at a year old, I think we're kind of doing better. Or, they're 60% better than what they're doing in the wild.
Yeah.
Now supplements. I know this. We're already getting kind of late, but I'm on my last page, guys. I want to go over supplements. So calcium, you want to watch out and make sure that you're getting the right calciums, because and it's not a specific company. Each company makes multiple different types of calcium. They have a whole line of calcium. There's not a one buy all, fix all calcium. You should have a calcium with D3 and a calcium without D3. So no matter what, you should have at least 2 calciums. The problem comes when you have like vitamin A is a fat soluble not supplement, vitamin. So if your calcium is high in vitamin A and calcium, then you're adding too much supplements that the bearded dragon isn't using, and it can't break it down, and it's also storing it in its body. Water soluble supplements just go out with the urates, with the poop. Whatever the bearded dragon didn't need or didn't use just goes right out the other end. With a lot of the supplements, not a lot, so I take that back. You just got to watch out which ones they are. Have fat soluble vitamins in them that you do have to be worried about, and make sure that you're not using them too much, because with supplements, more is not better.
Yeah, and even vitamin D3 is fat soluble, so you got to watch it. You can overdo vitamin D3 at the same time.
And that's why I say you need a calcium with and without D3, because D3 is very vital to the entire process of breaking other vitamins down for your bearded dragon. That is something in captivity that we need to replicate what they're getting in the wild. With the UVB and D3, it's breaking everything down in their body, making sure the nutrition is going where it should go in their bodies. So if you got too much UVB and too much D3, you're just overdosing the dragon. It doesn't need that. More is not better. You want to make sure that you're using the right amounts, because the right amounts are the only amount that is going to be good for your bearded dragon.
Yeah.
One calcium that I do recommend is calcium carbonate. Usually it's literally just powdered calcium. It doesn't have a ton of other supplements in it. One that I do have that I use is the Repashy Calcium Plus LOD. That's my no D3 calcium that I use, and then I have I don't know. I think it's actually I got it from Travis, the Lugardi D3. I've been using that for my D3 calcium right now, and this is my no D3. So, and you should be supplementing your D3 calciums maybe 2 times a week. You don't have to do it every other day, every day. Literally, like
It really
most
depends
people,
on your light.
Yeah.
If you have really good lighting, you can get away with doing that once every 2 weeks, once every 8 to 10 days, just to help make sure they're staying topped off on the vitamin D3. If you kind of have a lack of lighting, then you're going to have to do it more to make sure they're staying topped off. It's a fine line that you want to try to balance. And if you pay attention to your dragon enough, you're going to know when something's going bad. Whether they stop eating or they're getting really lazy, something is going to be off. And if that happened around the same time you're feeding it D3, you should probably back off of it. Just pay attention to the way that they are, and you shouldn't have any issues.
So if you guys have a water-soluble calcium, you can use that every single day to make sure that he's getting the right calcium, as long as it doesn't have like D3, vitamin A. There's a couple other ones that are fat-soluble that you want to make sure aren't in your calcium. But as long as you're using, you supplement it with a D3, like Travis said, maybe 8 to 10 days. Your D3 calcium should last you a long time. One small thing like this will probably last you a year if you have one bearded dragon. Just make sure your other calcium, he's getting an ample amount. Especially if you have a baby, they're growing, so they do tend to use more of the calcium that they're breaking down to grow their bones. A fully grown bearded dragon isn't growing as much. It's supplementing what it already has. Babies are growing, so they need as much calcium as you can give them. But you have to be careful of those other vitamins. Make sure you're not overdosing those, because vitamin D3 is very important in the immune system, the bones, cardiovascular, nerves and muscles, reproduction. D3 is what helps everything in the body. And you just need the perfect amount. You don't need too much, and you just want to make sure there's some there. Too much is negative for everything I just said. And you don't want negative in the immune system. You don't want negative in the nerves and the bones. You don't want twitches and stuff, because then you guys start thinking, it's a genetic issue, and it could literally be something that you're overdoing with supplements. And overdoing calcium, I kind of contradict myself right now, actually, because you can give what's called hypercalcemia, which is too much calcium, and then it starts clogging up the bearded dragon. It can't use its fat proteins, minerals, anything vital to the bearded dragon's health. It starts clogging up, and it starts shutting all those systems down until it can clear all that out. So you don't want to overdo the calcium either.
Well, usually if you start overdoing calcium, you'll notice a color in the urate. The urate will start turning like an orangish color if you're using too much calcium. And if you start seeing that, then you know to back off the calcium a little bit.
And when he says back off, you could probably not give it calcium for like a week. Let it flush its system, and then get yourself on a routine like every other day. Because maybe you were dusting a little heavy. So just change up your routine a little bit, slow it down. Less is more when it comes to supplements. You don't want to overdo it.
Yeah, long term, adding too much calcium long term, the body will still try to store it in areas that it shouldn't be storing it. So it'll store it in muscles, it can store it in its brain, in any of the tissues and whatnot. And once the body has stored it in that area, it will not be able to get it back out. So it's a permanent problem that you can run into whenever you have that. You got to remember everything has to run perfect together. One vitamin, if you're missing one vitamin, the other vitamin can't completely do its job. All of it has to be added. You can't just say, well, I'm low on B's, so I'm going to add vitamin B's, but not worry about the rest. Well, the vitamin B's can't work if it's missing something else in its whole system. You know, the whole system has to work in a perfect storm.
Yeah, it's an
'Cause even-
assembly line, guys. You know, if
Yeah.
one guy fucks it up, the whole assembly line after him is getting fucked up too. So you could be good on your first two stops, but if your assembly line isn't making it to its fifth stop, then you're still not doing the complete job you need to do.
Yeah, because it's so like when Arcadia developed all their supplements, they did it without the fat soluble because they did not want people to risk the chance of overdosing it. So everything is water soluble. But he put the building blocks through like carotenoids and whatnot into these the vitamin mixes. And that gives the animal the ability to produce its own vitamin A or vitamin K. So then it can self-regulate itself. I know some controversy on that. Some people say that reptiles cannot produce their own vitamins through the building blocks, but I mean, I personally think they can, you know, and John, he thinks that it can, and in my opinion, he's done a lot of research, and he wouldn't have said that or put that out into his supplements if it wasn't true, or if he didn't firmly think that it was true. And like, he also has the calcium with magnesium, because they found that magnesium is actually the homing beacon for your calcium. So their bodies will use the magnesium to tell the body where the calcium should be stored. Because they had issues where they were trying to cure, you know, metabolic bone disease. Adding calcium didn't work. Adding D3 with calcium started to work, but animals still started to die. And whenever they looked into it, the animal had a bunch of stored calcium pockets all over in the brain and the tissues. Whenever they added the magnesium, all of that started going away. So everything has to be in a perfect storm. And the water soluble, yes, you can do those every day. I saw I'm not even going to try to pronounce that name. But the water solubles you can do every day, because as long as you're keeping your animal hydrated, it will pass all that out. And then the fat solubles, those are the ones you do not want to do every day. Do those a couple times a week, once a week. That's all you're going to want to do for those.
And if you have a bearded dragon and you end up running into MBD and you already see signs of it, there is nothing you can buy at the store that is going to help you bring it back. You really need to go see a vet so that they can dose a vitamin or a liquid calcium supplement for you for your dragon's weight and size to start getting it properly back to health. A lot of people ask, like, can I get the liquid flukers calcium and just give that? No, you're going to end up overdosing your bearded dragon on other supplements that are in, or other vitamins that are in that supplement. So when you go to a vet, they're going to make something that is just pure liquid calcium dosed to the proper amount that dragon needs. Don't be a vet yourself. Don't look up any at-home remedies or anything. Once you got metabolic bone disease, just go to the vet. That's your best option. Don't play around with it.
Yeah, and once you start seeing signs of metabolic bone disease, you've already done damage, because all the organs and everything inside have already had damage from running low on their calcium. You know, and by the time you start actually seeing the physical signs of it, you've already done a lot of damage. So it's really important to educate yourself, know how to take care of that animal before you get it. Every species is different. Some of them require different types of vitamins, more of, and make sure that you're staying on top of it, because you don't want to wait until you see a crooked spine. If you had a crooked spine and it was already sucking all that calcium out, a lot of its organs, including the brain, the eyes, everything is already going to have like permanent damage that's irreversible.
Definitely. And you can also help prevent all that by gut loading your insects properly, you guys. If you have your own insects that you're buying and you're just keeping them in a container after you buy them and you're not feeding them at all, the best way I can explain it is you're feeding them an empty taco shell. So you're keeping it around, and now it's just a crunchy taco shell with nothing, no stuffing, no meat, nothing in the middle. It's not a taco supreme anymore. When you bought it, it was a taco supreme, and just slowly ate away all the insides until now it's just a taco shell, and that's what you're feeding your bearded dragon. So you want to make sure that you're feeding your feeders, because that's what you're going to be feeding to your dragons. So you want to make sure it's full of nutrition. And you start that with gut loading.
Yeah, that's very important, the gut loading part.
So, and if you have one bearded dragon, I know a lot of people will probably be ordering your insects. Even if you're ordering them, you want to make sure that you're feeding them weekly, daily. If you're getting a huge bulk supply, at least 1,000 or plus, make sure you're feeding them throughout the time that you have them, so that you're feeding off healthy insects to your bearded dragons too, to make sure that they're healthy.
Yeah, because when that insect gets shipped to you, it's already starved for 3 to 4 days, and it's running on its own nutrition to keep it alive. So it's going to use it all up. You have to feed it and keep
And
them
if
fed.
it's been, in newspaper or something, it's probably eaten some of the newspaper. So you really want to feed it to pass out everything that it has eaten while in shipment. Give it a day or two to flush out all the shit that it ate while it was in shipment.
Yeah.
Well, Travis, I think we freaking killed it, man. I don't know. I think we touched on everything. You got anything else you want to touch? Is there anything that we missed on? Anybody want to drop a comment on something we didn't touch on? What do you think, Trav? You got everything?
I think we got pretty much the basics down there. I think it was pretty good. We touched base on everything. Obviously, I'm always open. If there's more questions I need asked, you can feel free to DM me, about supplements, lighting, or anything like that. You need me to help you fine-tune something, I can do that. There's a lot of good resources online, too, that you can find. Great resources.
This is my man, too, when it comes to enrichment, man. Like we talked about, it could be substrate, it could be sticks in the cages, it could be pillows, reptile hammocks, whatever. You want to make sure that you're giving your dragons enrichment. If you only have one, can you touch on the yellow poop? So yellow poop is different than orange poop. Yellow poop could be dehydrated bearded dragon, or it could be too much supplements. You could start overdosing supplements, but your bearded dragon's poop will turn yellow when it starts getting dehydrated as well. And if it's getting dehydrated, your supplements that are water soluble aren't going to be passing through the dragon very well, so it's going to be retaining vitamins that it can't pass because you're not giving it enough water. Trav, you want to touch on that? Anything else? Maybe yellow poops or orange poops could be?
No, I mean, it could even just be something that they ate. Did they eat carrots? Did they eat pumpkin? That'll pass off as a different colored poo also.
Yeah, one time I fed bell peppers to my bearded dragon, bell peppers and strawberries, and I thought everyone shit blood the next day. I was so scared. I was like, what the hell? Oh my God. And it was then like the next day everyone shit normal. And I was like, oh, it must have just been the bell peppers and the strawberries, because that was scary.
Yeah, anytime you see something like that, just change the diet. And if it's still, look at what you fed it, and then change the diet. If you think that, like in your case, the bell peppers, if you think that did, well, then don't give them bell peppers. If it goes back to normal, then you know that that's what it was. If it doesn't, then it's time to hit the vet.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. I hope everybody, my phone didn't overheat, so that's a plus already. You guys got an hour and 15 minutes out of us tonight. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Travis, for coming on again. I know everything's been crazy on your end. This was a much-needed episode that we had to do. Travis was the only man I wanted to do this episode with. I know it's going to be a hit. Anybody that has a bearded dragon, has a friend that wants a bearded dragon, this episode will be uploaded to the Redzone Reptiles YouTube page. Also, you can support us on the Pogona Experience Instagram page. We do have a Patreon now. All of our merch that we will be releasing for the podcast will be free to all the Patreons. Depending on what tier you are, will be what merch you get, but we will not be selling any of the merch. Every dollar that we raise on the Patreon will be going back into merch, which will be going back to the Patreons to help spread the word of the Pogona Experience podcast, guys. So everything that we do here is going to go back to you guys. So we appreciate all the support you guys give us. And thank you for tuning in again Wednesday tonight. Travis, thank you for coming on and making this.
Not a problem.
And to everybody that tuned in, have a great night.
Deuces, man.